Okay, hello everybody. This is another advanced phrasal verbs lesson. So we've got lots to go through today. We're going through chapters 21 to 25 of the Advanced Phrasal Verbs book from Cambridge University Press, written by Felicity Odell and Michael someone, can't remember. But please, you'll find these books online very easily. It's just called Advanced Phrasal Verbs Cambridge. So if you want exercises for all of these phrasal verbs, find them in that book. Please buy that book. It's an excellent book. So, with no further ado, spring up and sprout up. This is a phrasal verb which means suddenly appear. And of course, this is literally, we use this for example, mushrooms. At a certain time of year, mushrooms will spring up or sprout up because the spores have developed into mushrooms. So it just means appear out of the ground. But we can also use these metaphorically for buildings, for example. You might say several new cafes have sprung up in the centre of town, or some new leisure facilities are sprouting up all around the city. So you can use it metaphorically or really for real growing things in the garden. Weeds sprout up, mushrooms sprout up. Fruit and vegetables, vegetables can sprout up as well. Okay, wind up can be used in two different ways, I've decided. It can sometimes be used in the sense of finish up in, end up in, land up in, which just means in the end you finish in this situation. So you could say something like, last night at 11 o'clock I wound up in this really seedy bar, for example. It's not true for me, but it means then you finished there, you ended there, you landed up in a really seedy bar. But you can also say wind up meaning to end something, like the lesson. So it's not just wind up in, it's also wind up, and here it's very similar to wrap up. I could say let's wind up the lesson with a test, or I could say let's wrap up the lesson with a test, meaning let's finish the lesson with a test. Or I could say he wrapped up the meeting at 6 o'clock. He wound up the meeting at 6 o'clock. So it can be used in both ways, this wind up. It can be used like wrap up, or it can also be used like finish up in, wind up in, end up in, land up in. Okay, finish with something. Very simple one, this. You can finish with an object. You might say to your friend, have you finished with the newspaper? If you have, can you pass it to me? I'd like to read it. But you can say to your, maybe you're in the kitchen, you might say to your wife, have you finished with the bread knife? I need to use it to cut some bread. So you can finish with anything. You can say, have you finished with the scissors? Have you finished with the glue? Anything you like. So it's a very common one to use in the classroom, certainly. If you're sharing an object, you might say, have you finished with that? I would like to use it. Can you please pass it to me? Okay, different things can open up, possibilities and opportunities. So you might say several opportunities have opened up in this particular market. Or you might say this has opened up the possibility of a new cafe in the centre of town. Yeah, perhaps some land has become available. You might say this has opened up the possibility of a new business, a new cafe. So open up is for possibilities and opportunities, and it means that they have been revealed or discovered, or there's now a chance for us to exploit these possibilities and opportunities. Now the next one, start on at someone about something. This is the one which you must remember, because so many other verbs you can use instead of start. If you start on at someone about something, you start complaining or nagging about something. And you complain to that person about something. And it's very similar to keep on at someone about something, go on at someone about something, bang on at someone about something, rabbit on at someone about something, waffle on at someone about something, ramble on at someone about something. There are so many, I couldn't possibly mention them all. So that one's really important. I've put a star next to it to say, learn that phrasal verb and learn many others at the same time as well, because there are literally at least 10, maybe even 20 different verbs you could use there. Okay, if we're talking about financial the financial markets, you might say that the price of gold has bottomed out. That would mean that it's hit its bottom. It's got as low as it's going to go, and now it's going to remain there maybe for a few weeks, but then it might take off again. Then it might skyrocket, who knows. But when the price bottoms out, or the market bottoms out, it hits the lowest point and stays there for some time. It's different from level off, but I wanted to remind you about level off just because it's also related to markets and to finance. If the price of gold levels off, it remains stable. It remains at the same amount, at the same price for a number of weeks, for example. That's when the price levels off. It remains the same for a long time. But if the price bottoms out, it hits the bottom. It gets as low as it possibly can go. Now, if something peters out, then it gradually disappears. I read this recently in a book where somebody's footprints gradually petered out as there was somebody following these footprints, and they noticed that they gradually disappeared over time. Perhaps the weather had eroded, had whittled away at the marks so that there were no marks left. So this peter out is quite common, and it means gradually disappear, especially used for marks on the ground, but it could even be sounds. You could say his voice petered out, in which case it's very similar to trailed off. Where's trail off? I think I've written it down here. In fact, this one is better for sounds. This whole chapter was about sounds, and if somebody's voice trails off, it gets quieter and quieter and then disappears. But yeah, footprints can peter out and various other things, and it means gradually disappear. Resources can dry up. This means that you have no resources left. So if your oil reserves dry up, you have no oil left. If your money dries up, funding can dry up for a particular project. That means there's no funding left, there's no money left. So dry up also means to have nothing left of something, a bit like run out of and be out of, because you can also say we've run out of money, yeah, we've run out of funding, we are out of funding. So funding can dry up, or you can be out of funding, you've got no money left. Okay, if you whittle away at something, this is like erode, and so it's very similar to eat away at, which has the same prepositions, notice. Eat away at, chip away at. We've done these in other lessons, and when you whittle away at something, you make it smaller and smaller and smaller until it disappears. But you can whittle away at your finances, you can whittle away at your money, meaning spend it and spend it and spend it until finally, unfortunately, it has all disappeared. It has all been chipped away and there's nothing left. Now, if someone magics something away, they make it disappear, as you might guess. It means that you make something completely disappear. You magic it away. It can be used, it's used metaphorically, obviously, because magic isn't real. And people do magic away various things. I'm trying to think of a good noun here, which you might say he magicked it away. So there may be, perhaps, I can't think of a good example for magic away. I'll come back to that one perhaps by the end and try and think of another noun which you can magic away. But it means to make something disappear as if by magic. Okay, if you press on, you march on, you soldier on, you push on, and it means continue in spite of difficulty. It means continue and try to get to the end of something. So a teacher could certainly say, right, we've only got 10 minutes left, let's press on so that we finish this chapter. And I've already said run out of and be out of. You should all be aware it's when you have nothing left of something. So you can say we've run out of time, we've run out of money, I've run out of patience. And you can also say we are out of sugar, we are out of biscuits, we are out of tea, we are out of coffee. Okay, up is quite often used with violence, as many prepositions are, not just up. But if violence flares up, then it means violence suddenly erupts, violence suddenly breaks out. Very similar to break out, because you can say fighting has broken out, conflict has broken out, fire has broken out as well, or an epidemic has broken out, an outbreak of something, right? So flare-up's pretty similar. You can say a conflict, it's usually used for violence though, conflict or violence or war has flared up in the Middle East. If somebody smashes something up, they break it to pieces, okay? It just means that they completely destroy something. They smash something to pieces, they smash it up. Here, up means many times. It's like chop up or cut up. You mean you cut it into many pieces. Tear up, tear it into many pieces. Rip up, rip it into many pieces. If you come at someone or fly at someone, you're attacking them. So this is also a violent preposition, at. If somebody comes at you with a knife, they attack you with a knife. And if somebody comes at you with a different kind of weapon, they attack you with that weapon. Now, bump off is used informally, not formally, but informally to mean kill someone. So an assassin has to bump off the targets which that he has been given. Now, if somebody fights someone off, then, and you could also say fend off here. I read this just in a book the other night, and I thought fend off is very good for fight off. It's very similar. If you fend off the attacker who came at you with a knife, you manage to fight back. You manage to stand up for yourself. Where's that one? Stand up for yourself and fight back against the attacker. And so you fend them off, maybe with your martial arts skills, or you fight them off, okay? Now the attacker might try to push you over or knock you over. Very important phrasal verb, this one, because you can knock over a vase as well. You can knock over a statue in a museum and then get in a lot of trouble. But if you push it over, then you do it on purpose. You knock something over very often accidentally, but push it over sounds like it's on purpose. And if you push someone over, you push them off their feet. You push them and make them fall over. Please remember knock over for when something is standing and it falls over, but also remember knock off, because you can knock the cup off the table, you could knock the book off the desk, you could knock the coffee off the photocopier. So remember knock over and knock off. If you fly into a rage, you get really angry, you get furious about something. So it's very angry kind of expression. If you round on someone, you attack or criticise. It doesn't have to be physically attack. It's very often used for when you start shouting or screaming, maybe at your colleagues. If you round on your colleagues, you start shouting and screaming at them for some kind of reason. Compare this with round up, which is very different, where you collect people together. You round up 6 people to play in your football team or something like that. You rope them into your football team. But round on would be when you criticise people, when you're shouting and screaming at them. If you push someone around, you boss them around. Yeah, very similar to boss someone around. And remember this around, because you could even knock someone around, but that would mean that you're hitting them. But that's very negative, of course. Push someone around and boss someone around just sounds like somebody's always giving you instructions and they're being bossy. A bust up is some kind of argument or fight. A break up is an argument or fight, usually of a romantic nature. A break up's normally when 2 people split up, but a bust up could certainly be between friends. Knock someone out is what a boxer does, and it's why we say a knockout when a boxer knocks the other guy unconscious. Knock someone out means knock them unconscious. And I want you to remember this one with pass out and blackout, because pass out and blackout also mean lose consciousness. They mean faint. Pass out means somebody has fainted, and blackout means that somebody has lost consciousness. They've blacked out. Wipe out means eradicate, make something go extinct, completely annihilate. So they say that a meteor may have wiped out the dinosaurs. Maybe. If the police stamp on drug dealing in the city centre, it means that they come down on drug dealing, they crack down on drug dealing, they clamp down on drug dealing. So stamp on is very similar to those 3 phrasal verbs, which I'm sure you've already heard me mention. If you turn on someone, that means that you suddenly attack one of your friends. So one of your friends is one of your friends one moment, and then suddenly you round on them, you start shouting at them and screaming at them, and you turn on them and maybe even come at them and start attacking. So turn on someone means suddenly become an enemy of someone who was once your friend. Suddenly start attacking someone who was your friend. So there's an element of betrayal in turning on someone. It can mean other things as well. It can mean excite sexually when you turn someone. That would be turn someone on though, and not turn on someone. Okay, so they're slightly different. If three attackers set on you, then they come at you, they attack you. Set on someone is attack. And that's why when you set the dog on someone, you make the dog attack someone. Okay, and if you drag someone into an argument, you pull them into an argument. It sounds like they were reluctant to argue with you, but you pull them into an argument, you drag them into an argument. So it sounds quite negative to me. Now, if a noise grates on you, it means it's really annoying noise. So sometimes there are noises in the background. It could be my fan, actually. The sound of my fan grates on me. It distracts me. It puts me off the lesson. It's very off-putting. And so it grates on me, this sound. Now, some sounds drown out other sounds if they're particularly loud. And so you might say the neighbour's music was drowning out my television last night and I couldn't hear the TV show. So drown out, it means stop it completely, be louder than other noises, drown out other noises, louder than other noises. Okay, if music is belting out or blasting out from your neighbour's house until 6 AM, it just means very loud music is being produced from that house. You can also say booming out, very loud music is booming out of that house. Now, bells in particular can peal out or ring out. You can say the wedding bells were pealing out. So you could hear the wedding bells from the local church. The bells were ringing. If a sound or party dies down, that means it becomes quieter and quieter and people start to leave. And if anything dies down, it means it becomes less active and it gets quieter and quieter. But it is very often related to sounds. Noises die down, parties die down. Now, if your voice trails off, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter until you can't hear it anymore. If you listen out for someone, maybe you listen out for the doorbell because you're expecting a package, and so you listen out for it. It's very similar to watch out for, but with your ear, obviously, and not your eye. So you can watch out for something, which means be very attentive to something visually, and you can listen out for something, which means keep your ears open for a noise like a doorbell or something like that. You can also listen in on a conversation, and I've mentioned this one many times before. It's when you try to hear somebody's conversation, and of course you shouldn't be listening to this conversation. You're listening to someone else's conversation. So it's eavesdropping, basically. It's trying to hear what somebody else is saying, and it's rude because it's a private conversation, but you're listening in on their conversation. You should remember this one with all of those other in-on clandestine actions, like let someone in on your secret plan, walk in on someone kissing, or on a couple walk in on your boss while he's stealing money, something like that. You can also be in on a secret plan, and you can barge in on someone, which means suddenly interrupt what they're doing, suddenly walk into the room and interrupt whatever they're up to in there. Now, don't forget as well from this chapter, shore up, prop up and buoy up, which means to support, very often used financially in economics. You can say this, the recent rise in interest rates is shoring up the economy, is propping up the economy, is buoying up the economy. So all of these mean support in some kind of way. Let's come on to 24. If you come out against or speak out against, you publicly oppose something. So you can say the minister has spoken out against, I'm not sure, what could we say? He has spoken out against the tax hikes or something like that. You can also say the minister has hit out at critics. He's lashed out at critics. This can mean physically attack or metaphorically attack. It can mean, as an argument, or it can mean physically. The attacker came at me and I lashed out at him. I started, you know, punching in all directions. But you could say he lashed out at his critics, meaning in an argumentative way, not in a physical way. Now, if you stick by your words, you stand by what you've said, it means you remain in your position. So it's very similar to stick to what you've said. But you can also stick by someone, meaning stand by someone, meaning support that person. So, of course, all husbands should stand by their wives and all wives should stand by their husbands because they should support each other. Now, you should stick to the rules in a game and you should keep to your principles in life because that shows a certain amount of consistency. It means that you're obeying the rules or you're sticking to your principles. If you defer to the experts, defer to someone, it means you say, okay, the experts know more than me about this topic, so I'm going to defer to him because his knowledge is much deeper on this topic than my own knowledge. So very often we defer to the experts if we don't feel confident about our knowledge in a certain area. If you go along with what someone has said, or you play along with what someone has said, it means you assume that what they said was true, even though you're not actually certain that what they say is true. So you very often go along with what someone suggests, just to see if the suggestion is a good one, even though you have reservations about the suggestion. And if you play along with someone, it's very similar. You pretend that you follow their idea or that you believe what they say is true, even though you don't necessarily believe it in reality. Now, if you give in or cave in to demands, or you give in or cave in to somebody's pressure, or some pressure from somewhere, it means you acquiesce. Very similar to the word acquiesce. It means you say, okay, the kidnappers have asked for £1 million and in the end I had to cave into their demands because I wanted to see my child again or something like that. So you cave into their demands, you give into their demands, you surrender, you acquiesce, you say, okay, I'll pay the money. Now, if you stand for something, you're in favour of it, and if you stand against something, you're against it. So that's a nice easy one. If you side with someone, you're on their side, but if you side against them, you're on the opposite side. If you stand up for someone, you defend them. You say that they're absolutely right and you're going to also defend their opinions. But if you stand up to someone, you stand up to an enemy. It's an enemy you stand up to. You stand up for your friends and you stand up to your enemies, because enemies will attack you, and if you're not going to be a wimp, if you're going to be strong and say, no, I'm not going to allow this to happen, you have to stand up to your enemies. Now, this next one I used on one of the comments that I wrote. Somebody made a very good comment and said that you should say NASA has and not NASA have. They were absolutely right. I think in spoken English in the UK, it's acceptable to say NASA have, but in a written essay, I would definitely go for NASA has, providing that I don't make a mistake. But I did say in the comment, the Americans lean towards always using a singular verb with a collective noun. They lean towards that particular grammar understanding. And so to lean towards means to be support one particular opinion, to be more inclined to do one particular thing or follow one particular idea. So in Britain, we lean towards using collective nouns, either plural or singular, which is really confusing and no good at all, really. But in America, they lean towards only using singular nouns, singular verbs with collective nouns. Okay, if you egg someone on or cheer them on, you try to encourage them to do something, but egg on is negative. It's more like when you put someone up to something, when you are a bad influence on that person and you encourage them to do something bad. Now, if you swear by something, it means you absolutely follow something. Let me think of a good example for this. If you swear by, some football teams will swear by the use of non-grass pitches, and it means they completely support, they think that that's a much better idea than using a grass pitch. But you can swear by anything, it just means that you completely follow it with all of your heart, and yeah, that's what you think about that particular issue. I'll try and think of some more examples for that one, but you can find millions of them in the dictionary online, so please do look before you ask below for me to give more examples. Now, if you say, I wouldn't hear of it, this is very often used in polite society. Maybe somebody's come to your party and they start picking up rubbish at the end of the party, and you say, please don't do that, I wouldn't hear of it, I wouldn't hear of somebody tidying up for me after my party, so please don't bother, I'll do that, I wouldn't hear of that. Or maybe somebody offers you a lift to a party and you say, no please, I wouldn't hear of it, I would prefer to get a taxi. So not hear of is very often used when you're trying to be polite and you're saying, you know, I wouldn't possibly do that. Okay, cotton on to something means start to understand. Catch on is pretty much the same, and so is latch on, but latch on can also mean to attach itself. And if somebody latches onto you, it normally means that you don't want them to be hanging around you, but they latch on, they're tenacious and they won't let go. Hold on, let me check the time. Okay, it's getting later, I've got to hurry up. So you might tell a joke and nobody cottons on to the punchline, nobody catches on, nobody understands it. But you might have a secret plan, you might all be in on a secret plan, and you have to make sure that one of your friends, maybe you're organising a surprise birthday party, you have to make sure that the person whose birthday it is doesn't cotton on about your plans, because it's got to be a surprise. So they mustn't cotton on about the surprise birthday party, they mustn't catch on to what's going on. And I think we often say cotton on about. Now if you hit on an idea, you hit on a really good idea usually. It means that you suddenly have a great idea, you come up with a great idea. If you reflect on something, it's a formal phrasal verb meaning to think deeply about something. But there's also all of these ones which also mean to think something over, to mull something over, muse something over, chew something over, churn something over as well. Remember this churn, there's some other good ones with churn. For example, a prolific writer will churn out hundreds of novels every year. So churn out means produce lots of, but churn over means to think something over in your head. You can also say your stomach's churning, which means that there's some kind of horrible liquid or food inside there which is making you feel sick. So we also say my stomach's churning, meaning I feel sick. Now if you come at a problem from a certain direction, it means approach a problem from a certain direction. Really quite common for talking about how you approach certain problems. If you bounce ideas off your colleagues, this is like brainstorming. You're bouncing ideas around to try to find out what's the best idea, what's the best course of action. Now, after you've bounced your ideas around, the answer might leap out at you, which means the answer becomes obvious. It's staring you in the face. It suddenly leaps out at you. So very often used for the answer or the solution leapt out at me. If you thrash an issue out with your colleagues, it means you debate them, you discuss this issue, you bounce ideas around again. And these last three all mean to deal with some kind of problem, to deal with a difficult problem, to grapple with a problem, to wrestle with a problem, to struggle with a problem. And you could even wrestle with conflicting emotions or conflicting desires. Maybe you have two completely opposite desires. I think this is very common for humans to vacillate between two different positions, and so you might be wrestling with a dilemma where you're not sure whether you should act like this or like that, and so you're wrestling with that particular dilemma. Okay, loads of phrasal verbs there. I'm sorry I didn't think of a good example for magic away, but it just means to make something disappear as if by magic. And I don't think I did swear by particularly well, but when you swear by something, it means you accept that it's the best idea, that it's the best way of behaving or of acting. So if you have any questions, please put them under the video. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope to see you all soon.